So before we get started, just a quick note to make sure everybody's on the same page. This is a day-long event, formally on Solstice. We're in the second of 3 live recordings, and then there'll be 4 pre-recorded sessions next, and all of it's going to be available for you to revisit. And for those who I've had a few people say, you know, it's Father's Day, I can't make it. So we're kind of like the podcasts, an ever evolving and growing group. Okay, cool. Audio and visual are good and better. Thank you guys for your feedback. All right, so let's just slowly ease our way into the content for this session. When the Earth Goddess retreat came through for me, I was in the midst of teaching the first round of the Goddess course, and it was very clear that it's a female thing, but it's a divine masculine, divine feminine. Ideally, we're all equally balanced. And one of the things that we can feel is very much drifted off course is that we're leaning heavily in the masculine way of doing things, and the feminine way, you know, it's really aptly timed, given all the world events and just in general, for us to remember and re-embody. So that's really what this, the foundation of the retreat and a lot of my work is about. And then this in particular is, I think, for us to connect to Mama Earth and connect to the divine feminine by really coming to understand that she is the physical embodiment of that. She's probably one of the best examples where we don't need to journey. We can just connect to the world around us. So in that regard, you know, many of us I live in the Bay Area, you know, so a lot of us live in cities or in developed places. We're connected to nature, but it's almost like it's been paved over and we think it's been lost. But one of the things that I want to share with all of us, where no matter where we are, if you can bring your imagination down through that concrete jungle, you know what's below all those buildings is the earth. So there's an opportunity for everybody everywhere to connect with nature is the first thing I want to say. And the other thing is that Mother Nature always knows us. As we explore this, we come to remember it's humanity that's forgotten. Mama Earth is always supporting us. She always knows where we're at on her skin. She always knows what we're up to. It's us who get in our minds and get disconnected. So this retreat is very much about connecting. And one of the things that came through unexpectedly, but quite potently when I was preparing the materials, was about, it's a time for us to remember and re-embody how intrinsically we are connected to everything. And this brings us to, it's a time for us to remember who our ancestors were. Who were the ancestors of the place where we live? What is the memory of the land where we're at? And so it's a little bit of an interesting question there, because there's a lot of, there's almost like a PTSD trauma that we have, where, especially if we're descended from European lineage, you know, we don't have a lineage that we can call out and we can call back, you know, 50 generations. That memory has been lost. And one of the things that really came through was to explore a little bit about that as we're seeking to remember all of these past ways of doing and being, and potentially come to remember, even if we can't name everything, just know that we do have ancestors, and we have the ancestors of our trees that are all around us. And we can kind of consider that our ancestors, the people who walked the land and communed with her and knew this way of living that we're seeking to remember, They saw the animals as their friends. They saw the trees and the valleys and the rocks as alive. And I think for a lot of us that are gathered here today and who are drawn to this material, we feel the truth of that. We're awakening to that. And I want to share a story. I want to share a story that I was listening to a podcast by a Celtic shaman. And he was talking about how in his, in his middle life, about 20 years ago, he had this realization that we're talking about right now, that, wow, well, I guess I probably do have elders. I mean, I have a lineage of people that his great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, and even if they weren't connected, there still is a thread of connection. So he was seeking elders to teach him. And a group of Native American elders had arrived in Britain, and he went and sought these Native Americans out. And he asked them to teach him whatever he had forgotten. And they said to him, sir, you appear to be very educated. Have you been educated? And he said, yes, I went to college. And they said, well, okay. And did you take history classes? Did you learn about history? And he says, well, yes, I sat in the history classes. And then they said to him, if you want to work with us, we need you we need you to name your tribes. Do you know who the tribes of this land are? Do you know the tribes of your ancestors? Name your tribes. Name the history of what brought you here. And you can kind of feel it in the energy. He said he got a little weepy because he didn't know. He didn't have any idea. And then the Native Americans began to call out these Dangstum names, or just like Celtic ancient names, tribal, the communities of the people that had inhabited that land. The Native Americans knew all that information, and many Native tribes have held on to that information. And it's interesting for, I think, a lot of us, and it doesn't have to be a Euro centric story. I think this applies to a lot of us who exist in the modern world, that is a void that we have. It's a little bit of a hole in our ability to understand. And it's interesting because as I was teaching the most recent version of the Goddess course, do you remember in history class when you learned about the Greco-Roman era and how that era was bringing civilization, and all these major feats and all these beautiful things happened during the Roman and Greek eras, and we're taught to, honor these pieces of art and all this high culture. And it's interesting because I was listening to this Celtic shaman give a perspective that I'd never heard, and I want to share with you all right now as we are kind of seeking to reconnect to the earth. He was talking about how he knew his ancestors were Celtic and Druidic in heritage. And the story goes that, we're taught in class that there were these heathen people who were barbarians who the Romans conquered and did the favor of bestowing culture. That's one story, but another potential story is that those people were the Celts and the Druids, and they lived much like our Native Americans live in the land where I live in America. They lived very close to the land. They lived very simple lives. And to those people who perceive themselves kind of like society today, technology seems to be the dominant, better thing. But I think we all know, this tree behind me is high technology. So anyway, the Romans and the Greeks, kind of like what happened with the Spanish, murdered and decimated entire cultures and entire tribes of information when they were conquering and when they were actually bestowing this gift of high culture. And the way that it's described is much like a kid who has abusive parents. That kid, if unless properly dealt with, that kid goes and sort of meets it out on everybody else, takes it out on other other kids and in other ways, and has to, you know, energy must be processed. So culturally, that led to what happened with the Spanish and where we are in America. And it's interesting because when he said that, I realized how long it had been since anyone had sought to really remember in a broad cultural way. And so I want you to imagine for a second both your own genetic ancestors and where you live right now, the people that have inhabited an idea in the future, the people who will inhabit the land where you live, all know it to be sacred and hold all things as sacred, because we can recapture that and we can just simply choose to re-embody it. And I want to share, this is kind of a strong quote, but this shaman said that these natives said to him, and I'm going to read it so that I can make sure I get it right. Until the day comes that the people of your islands, which is Britain, once again return to the woods, the mountains, and the streams to pray, we will always be frightened of you, for you see with dead eyes, and your madness may be all that it takes to tip the scales. And that was some 20 odd years ago. And that's a pretty strong quote, but I think somewhat relevant for where we're at today and what we know we need to do, who we really want to be. And so we can consider that right now the earth longs to reconnect with us as much as we get the sense of the deep longing of many generations to live in right relationship with her, to live communing with her. And so in the spirit of this retreat for the next middle of this day, we're going to be casting a sacred circle. It's a Wiccan, it's a Celtic tradition, but it's really just invoking the four directions as a matter of creating sacred space. And I was guided to give us a full hour. You can do this at your own pace, but to allow us a full hour to, and the word that came through was commune with the direction, because of the depth of remembering that we're seeking, to consider spending an hour. And you know, I have a video and a meditation and a ritual, and we get to know the elemental spirits, we get to know the colors, we get to know all these things that are associated with each sacred direction, and they're all sentient, they're all seeking for us to remember. So we're going to have this opportunity today on Solstice and in the future to connect and to experience and ultimately to invoke a sacred circle we're going to start where the sun rises in the east, and we're going to go to the south and the west and the north. And then by the time we come back to gather live, if you're able to meet us again at 3 p.m., we will have created a sacred circle. And I would invite you to share with me the intention to be remembering and right relations. And I'll get to some principles I want to share with you next, because we're going to get into, when we seek to remember, it can feel a little bit like we're dreaming. It can feel a little bit like, you know, when you were a kid and it was actually your third eye open and you got told you were too imaginative. We really do get to be invited to imagine and remember. And so the next thing I want to share with you is going to be my desktop. I'm sitting in a little bit of a funny sunny place, so hang tight. Let me see if I can, there we go. Okay.
Shall I go?
So just take this in for a second.
Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us and the world will be as one.
All right. So that's such an perfect invocation. And that song's been around for quite some time, but never more relevant than right now. And so as we consider that we get to dream our world awake, we get to imagine and create, simultaneously remember and also invoke and dream. And I want us to consider this question next. What does divine feminine mean? We started this hour, this idea of the masculines really, the scales are kind of tipped, right? So there's a lot of masculine in our world right now, and the feminine's kind of lacking. So what does that mean? What does it mean? What does divine feminine mean? Who is it? What is it? Rasa says harmony. And we could even say, what does it mean to you? It was an interesting question as I was creating the goddess course again and again. I have the privilege of being a female, so I know some things, but I also, if anything, it's just realizing what I have forgotten. And this brings us back to something I mentioned before. Nadia says unconditional love. Yes. Mother Earth is a female goddess. We'll greet her as we meet the earth element today. But if you consider, Katie B says Kali, change and fire. Yes. Mother Earth is the primordial goddess, and she is a physical manifestation. She's here, we're in the 3D world together. So as we seek to remember divine feminine, all of the words that are coming through. Unconditional love, yes. You know who gives water and life and earth, just sustenance to everybody, even the ones that are, you know, pillaging her innards. She unconditionally loves us. And there's this potential for amazing harmony. Also, Kali, change and fire. Mother Earth is, you know, as any goddess, is fierce. And when rebalancing needs to happen, gosh darn it, she rebalances herself. And so, you know, all of those things are, they're part of the divine feminine. Vilnius is healing with soft voice spoken from the heart. Yes. So I want that to be an ongoing question for us. Hold on a second. I need to share my screen with you guys again. And I'm okay, there we go. I'm seated in the sun where you can kind of see where I'm seated beneath this tree. My computer screen is a little bit hard to see. So I want to share next. As we consider remembering, as we consider seeking our ancestors and seeking the ancestors of the land, this brings me to sort of some of the principles of the nonprofit that, I hope that you can see this. The whole idea of this nonprofit that came through was really based on this, was we gotta remember, we gotta really get back and take steps to get back into right relations. So some of these principles, I believe, as we seek to find our ancestry, find the people who know the land, reciprocity. Reciprocity does not mean that I give you something because you gave me something. That's the way our world works now, right? You can only get a sandwich from the sandwich guy if you give him $5, and that's fine. But reciprocity says, I give to you because my cup is full. Many shamanic, many magical cultures know how to invoke this. You know, when you want abundance, you give. And really what we're being come to remember right now is that we're not separate. All these walls that we put up, all the ways that we've been taught that we, you know, everything in our house is ours, and then we save our money and then we keep it safe until we die and then we pass it on. And we've kind of got these separate circles of where everybody exists. And reciprocity kind of says, wait, there's an abundant planet that we live on. And if Mother Earth is unconditionally loving and giving to us, then, and we know that we're supported, then it should be a little bit easier for us to remember and re-embody that I give because I believe my cup is full. And in that act of giving, I invoke that energy. And you know what happens at that juncture? I've witnessed it. I've done a little experiment with myself for the last year to just see if I really believed this. It's so amazing how much abundance is there when we invoke this principle. The next principle is what we've been alluding to, which is right relationship with our planet. And I think all of us can really feel the need as we're seeking to know the ancestors of our land, seeking to be in right relationship with Mother Earth. And we can feel how our ancestors did see all the animals as their friends and all the plant and the elementals as these things had sentient nature, even the rocks, even the rivers. And it's hubris for us to think that just because it doesn't speak and just because it's not human, that it's something that's less than us. So that is all a part of right relationship. Another principle that came through was sovereignty. And sovereignty means supreme power, freedom from external control, supreme excellence. And really that means everything. That means my sovereignty. It means the sovereignty of everyone who's gathered. It means the sovereignty of the tree behind me. It means the sovereignty of every single person that walks this planet. And then that brings us to another principle that I just feel is so relevant for right now, interconnectedness. And I've alluded to this. We are seeking to remember that we're not separate. And Mother Earth wants to remind us that everything we do to her, we do to ourselves. Also, everything we do to one another, we do to ourselves. So it also very much karmically serves us to do the right thing and to be in right relationship, because they're ultimately, I believe what our ancestors want us to remember is that there is no separation. This one can feel a little bit interesting and also very needed right now. We're supposed to be joyful people. Follow your joy. When about a year and a half ago, I've told this story a couple times, I would be woken up in the middle of the night by this rush of ecstasy, as energy. The best way I could describe it is ecstasy. And it would only last for like 5 or 10 seconds. And I kind of said to Spirit, what is that? And the voice came through, this is how you're meant to live. You know, we're really off the mark right now. When we can commune, when we can get back into these right relations, we're supposed to be super joyful people. And one of the clues that we have to get back to that is, does this feel good to me? Does this feel joyful? And that's different than, you know, you've got to get your 9-to-5 job and it's going to be hard work and then maybe someday you'll deserve it. You know, that's kind of this old patriarchal language, when we really can just know that we're held and know that we're a part of a greater thing. We can get a little bit more comfortable with following our joy. And this is actually this next one is a Native American principle that I think is going to be a challenge for us, but we will be well suited to at least entertain, that we have to replace every single thing we take from the earth within our lifetime. That's the ultimate karma. That the Native Americans knew that. They honored the meat that they ate. They honored the plants that they ate. They reseeded, they reinvigorated, and the earth is this beautiful sentient being that co-created with them, that continually gave them more harvest and more trees and more animals, and they honored this whole symbiotic nature of things. And so I think for us, that feels a little bit like of an aggressive goal, but I think it's really cool for us to entertain that. And then we have radical self-love, because we've been also taught to shame ourselves and to speak down about ourselves, and to, you know, every single one of us has a negative voice in our head that tells us at some point that we're not good enough, that we didn't make enough money, that we're not deserving, that all the knots that keep us from that heart light that we activated in our first meditation. That's also a way of radical self-love. So I invite us on this journey today, and to make a note in the future, that whenever we can have an opportunity to simply choose to love ourselves, because when we choose that, we're going to be able to gift it to other people. So the more love that we can give and gift to ourselves today, as this is a huge seeding day, this is a solar eclipse, this is summer solstice, it's really great for us to be invoking these principles today. But consider that also, you know, the more we can give this unconditional love to ourselves, that will enable us to seed it out, to give it to others, because we can only give to others whatever we have to offer for ourselves. Which brings us to the final principle, which is deep self-trust. And part of that feels like intuition. It is, it's remembering, learning to trust ourselves, to know that we'll always be guided to the right place, and to check in with ourselves and to notice when we don't feel something's quite right, and to allow things to unfold in a very organic way, and following that intuition. If something's not comfortable, if something's in our gut, if we could feel our heart closed, to read those symbols and to respect our own natural wiring for intuition, and to ultimately, that's part of that radical self-love, is to really be able to trust ourselves. So that's simultaneously, that gives you an idea. Those are all the principles of the Seeding Reciprocity nonprofit that's just rolling out right now, but they're also, they're human principles, and they're principles that are worth considering right now. And as we head into the next 4 hours of potentially personal space, to be able to commune with these elements. I want to pause right now for a moment and see if anybody has any comments or anything they would like to ask or speak or share. I've been talking for a little over a half an hour. Anybody? All right.
I hate always jumping in, but I wrote it in the chat room, but I don't know if you could see on your computer, but you have a beautiful blue hue all over you.
Oh, that's okay. So I saw that you wrote it, and then because where I'm sitting, the sun's kind of doing something on my very dusty computer screen. I can kind of see it, but now it's and I'm only a little corner of the screen. But yeah, I guess in the recording, you know, it's interesting. I'll share with you guys. I was asking Spirit about where to hold these gatherings for us today, because I live in a beautiful tiny vortex in Los Altos. It's the heart of Silicon Valley, and I get 1 bar of internet service, which is a challenge to do a video conference. And you saw that was our meditation. And then, you know, Spirit said, go to the library, and the library is still adjusting to its new COVID rules. And I wanted to keep this sacred. And I was guided to just sit here, and I asked for the right place to sit. So whatever you're seeing, I think, is just the sun's blessing upon us on solstice, and then Spirit responding that, you know, we're always, that's part of our trusting our inner guidance, right?
Yeah, I feel that though.
Yeah, thank you. Vilma says, I was getting chills when you were talking about the shaman experience. Yeah, that shaman experience, when he said, for you see with dead eyes, I thought, that's a little aggressive. But then if you think about the way that we're wandering around our planet, we can see perfectly well, but what are we seeing? What are we looking at? What are we choosing to see? Because, you know, I wanted to get back to, you know, each of us are energetic beings. So we're all sovereign, and we all get to send into the ether our vibration, right? So this is also kind of a harnessing the power of our energy. And as we seek to remember, we're gonna vibrate differently. And our eyes will see differently, and the world will be perceived differently. You know, I think, oh, Katie B says, shaman story was cool. Can you say the shaman's quote again, if it makes sense? Yeah, I'll say the whole quote. But just to close the idea of, we already all each see with our own set of eyes. And what those people were inviting the Western world to consider is that the things that, the way that we see is not real, you know. And I think the times that we live in, we can kind of feel the very fragile, tenuous nature of this seemingly dominant, superior way of being. And that gets us back to that idea when the shaman was talking about how the Greco-Roman culture was this cultural gift to the world. And I'm using that accent because that's kind of how I learned about it, you know. Oh, Michelangelo, and those are still beautiful works of art, but what was below the surface was all this stuff that was buried. And we are living in a similar time where there's a lot of sexy things out there. You know, what kind of technology do you have? Where do you live? And what artist are you following? And all that is perfectly fine, but we need to go below the surface and choose to see with different eyes. The quote said, until the day comes that the people of your islands, which was Britain, once again return to the woods, the mountains, and the streams to pray, We will always be frightened of you, for you see with dead eyes, and your madness may be all it takes to tip the scales. So yeah, that quote's intense, but we live in intense times. And I'll repeat this. This one thing that came through, I did a series of online free gatherings right at the start of COVID. It was called In 5D. And the first message that came through was the amount of chaos that you're experiencing and that you will continue to experience does not need to be feared, because with your eyes, you can see that it points you to the vast potential of change. So the exact amount of uncertainty that we feel is the exact amount of potential for us to be doing these things, like spending time on Solstice to remember who we are and why we're here. And even if we have to go back so many generations to even connect to an ancestor that might have been doing the things that we're seeking to remember, to know that that lineage is there for us, to trust that, and to trust that the earth hasn't forgotten us, to trust that really that this information, just like when, you know, I talked about how the concrete jungle has, you know, taken over the cities. Somebody's not muted. I'm going to make sure everybody's muted. Okay, so the concrete jungles have taken over these cities, but the earth is always beneath there. She hasn't forgotten anything. And it's, you know, you can see, you can picture the image of the little tree or plant that grows out from the crack in between the concrete, right? The earth will always be there and just wants us to return. So we have this wonderful, you know, when Imagine was playing, I got a little teary because I felt this vast hug of, if you're ready to remember from Mother Earth, if you're ready to remember, I'm ready to remind you. You know, I'm ready. If you want to commune with me, I've been waiting for you. And it's like this, just this divine mother who doesn't have any human hangups and is just unconditionally, you know, those qualities that we were talking about, harmony, unconditional love, change and fire, and speaking with the truth from the heart. That is Mother Earth. So the one final thing that's coming through, just to share with you, is that, as I've said a couple times, this next phase is going to be up to you. I will update as soon as we're done with this gathering. I'll update the website, and you're going to see, I've suggested 4 time blocks of, you know, the next hour will be air, and then the next hour will be fire, and then followed by water, and then earth. You might just choose to watch the video or do the MP3 or do the ritual or any or all 3, but see if you can maybe consider whatever you want to peruse from the material. See if you can try to go in order, in the sense of invoking that sacred circle of space. So even if you can't get to all the aspects of air, maybe consider just greeting the element of air before you go to fire, so that we'll all be creating this. And that's not something that I yet understand the why, but I do understand that it's a sacred, it's just a sacred way that they invoked the elements. So I'm I'm being told I'm a little toddler learning to walk with some of these concepts, but I'm just kind of sharing. They're also kind of saying, but yeah, you're right. Like, tell them to go in order. So, the blue is pulsing. That's great. I feel so blessed to be sharing this day with you guys. I was really nervous, actually. It's funny. I was really nervous the whole last week about this, and I couldn't tell why. And I've noticed that whenever I'm really nervous, it's because something really profoundly simple and truthful is coming through. So thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to gathering with you guys again at 3 o'clock, and maybe we can do a little bit more sharing if you want to. There's no forced participation here. I kind of saw that most of this was going to be my video talking, and everyone participating and communing as they're able. But yeah, if there's anybody has any final things to share before we close this hour, I will prepare to close it. Just a moment to see. Okay, so then this and the first meditation will also be available eventually on that same page, and you're going to get to be able to visit that page with all the content as often as you'd like. So let's take a moment to connect to our hearts, connect to your heart center. You can close your eyes if you'd like. You can place your palms over your heart. Connect to that sacred, brilliant glow, that beautiful, most powerful aspect of you. I've come to know our heart centers really are our most powerful spot. And just give yourself gratitude for taking the time today to sit in virtual sacred ceremony. Sacred because of our pure intention to remember and to honor and to be and exist in right relation. So just with your hand over your heart, send yourself that honoring, that gratitude for the choice that you're making to spend your time and your conscious energy on this day that our ancestors knew and held as sacred. And then also to connect to the circle of hearts that are gathered around the world. Coming together to support each other and to genuinely seek to heal and grow and change. And then take a deep breath in. You can take your hands off your heart. Take a deep breath in and just hold that breath for a moment and imagine that you're just sealing this energy that you're feeling right now, just kind of infusing it into your field. Hold it and then release. And we'll do that 2 more times to make 3 total. So breathe in and imagine you're just breathing in all this energy, all this wisdom and knowing. Breathe it into your cells, breathe it into your aura, hold it, and then breathe out. And then 1 more time, breathing in. Hold it. Let it infuse into your body and breathe out. All right. In about 2 minutes, you can refresh your link to the website page and all the materials you need will be up. And I am looking forward to seeing everybody again live and in person. I hope that you can join me today at 3 p.m. Okay, tons of love, guys. Bye.